Hey guys, welcome back to Inside Marketing. I'm very excited today. I'm joined by Taylor Haydon, who's the head of marketing communications at ActiveMe 360, and she's been ultra kind to hop on a call today to walk us through her marketing journey, but also understand how she kind of sees this whole marketing world through her eyes. So, Taylor, great to have you on. Thank you for coming.
No, thank you for having me. Thanks for asking.
It's an absolute pleasure. So Taylor, look, here's where I'd love to start. Can you give us a bit of an insight in terms of where you started out in marketing, I suppose your entry point into this world, and then maybe give us a bit of a summary in terms of the path that you've kind of walked down to kind of get to where you are right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started how I imagine quite a few people start in marketing. When I was a teenager, I had no idea what to do, where I was going. I knew that university wasn't a viable option for me, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I wanted to do more than just pick up more shifts at the restaurant I was working at. I thought I want to start a job that I could build as a career. So I Googled, what do I do with my life? And I took one of those online quizzes and marketing came up as kind of an option. And I'd known about marketing because I had a teacher who had previously worked in communications and advertising. And when speaking about kind of that career path, I knew it was something that sounded interesting to me. So I thought I would just explore that route, really. And so I knew I needed something to help me get that foot in the door. So I actually did a short course with Pittman's training group. They did, at the time, it was a digital and social media thing. I can't remember the title exactly. And it only took about 6 or 8 weeks to do. I did fund it myself through my waitressing hours. But what that gave me was actually just a general understanding of the bare minimum of marketing. What is social media? What's the purpose of it? How do companies utilize it? What's a website? You know, the core essentials to it all. And then I was really lucky that I knew someone who had a small agency and they were willing to give me some work experience. So huge shout out to Adam Richards at Waypoint Marketing and Mike Crompton from Summit Digital, because they took me on with no experience and paid me for it just to give me that kind of, gentle approach into marketing. And then I applied quite a few times to this local agency, formerly Remarkable Group, they're now called Cavendish. And I worked initially as a data assistant and then went into their marketing assistant role, did the internal marketing before going over to client-side marketing, where I worked up to account manager, which those 5 years were really pivotal to kind of my marketing grounding, I suppose, and kind of led me to then move on to work for a local council, which was really amazing for my general comms experience rather than just marketing experience. And then I went over to where I'm at now, ActiveMe 360, and since then have started to build a marketing team. So that's kind of my journey into it. I feel like that's quite a long roundabout way of saying
great,
it. But
great. And you know what I love about that is it's quite nice to hear a story where, and to be honest, it's not the traditional went to uni, studied marketing because I had a degree in marketing, felt like I should do a marketing job kind of thing. You know, like, and so when you work in the restaurant, just rewinding back further, like I know there was a bit of interest, you know, it looked interesting from the marketing perspective about maybe exploring that, but can you remember what specifically it was that intrigued you about it?
yeah, so I love people, and I love kind of, I'm not the most creative person out there. You know, there are people who are far superior in the creative realm, but I like that element of creativity. And so I knew that marketing kind of came across like a good balance of creation, people were at the heart of it, and I've always been quite organised and good at managing quite a lot of different tasks, and marketing offered that skill, whereas I felt like a lot of other things that were available at the time, whether it was going through university or a different job field, it was either really academic or really hands-on. Marketing was that in between, and I am a proud in-betweener. I've never been amazing at one field or another, and I think that's why maybe a lot of marketers I meet also have imposter syndrome, because I feel like a lot of us are people who we're good at lots of different things, but you may not feel like you excel in any one particular area. So that's what drew me to it in the first place.
Yeah, do you know what's interesting, Taylor? Because, you know, since we've launched Inside Marketing, and, you know, we've been interviewing some great people, the imposter syndrome is something that keeps coming up time and time again.
Yeah.
And my gut feel is I mean, let's just I'll take the example. Let's say you're a solicitor and you work in employment law, right? And you're in the UK. Like, really, the ceiling of your expertise is understanding pretty much everything there is to know about UK employment law. Whereas if you translate back to our world of marketing, which is ever evolving by the day, you can never know everything about everything, and the technology is just so vast and broad and wide that you just can't know. And maybe do you think that's where the imposter syndrome comes from?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's kind of a combination of things, exactly what you said, where it is changing every day. So when you've mastered something, you feel like you've finally gone to terms with something, it's changed. And there may not be any rhyme or reason. Algorithms change daily. So something that you think you know about social media then doesn't work and all of that. But I think, and I can't speak for people who are maybe in leadership levels on an agency perspective, but from an internal marketing point of view, quite often you are the most expert person in your company. And when you feel like maybe you're not necessarily at that level yourself, that sometimes comes into it because you think, well, how do I know if I'm doing a good job? How do I know if I'm not doing a good job? Because I'm expected to know the most about marketing, and that can be where it becomes quite tough. And that's where I think you have to have confidence in yourself and your ability to say, actually, no, I don't know everything, and that's okay, but I'm not an imposter for that.
Yeah, absolutely right. And do you find that like almost like you have to remind yourself of that when those kind of imposter syndrome thoughts come in? Is there anything else you do to kind of help you with that?
Yeah, I think I always try to bring it back, and what I try to pass on to my team as well is no matter what you do, whether it works or doesn't work is kind of beside the point. If you can show that you've made a plan or a strategy based on the information you had available to you and you have executed it to the best of your ability, no one can ever fault you for trying. You know, if you make decisions based on the finances that you have available and you've said, we're going to do this because it could potentially bring back this return on investment, or we're doing this because over the past 6 months, this is what the reports have been telling us. You know, if it doesn't work out, it's not because you're not good enough, it just didn't work. So I feel like when it comes to imposter syndrome, it really is just if you've taken the time to plan and to kind of think about every angle, you're going to be golden. You know, it doesn't really matter if it doesn't work then.
Yeah. And it's interesting because like going back to your kind of agency experience, kind of working through the ranks there, like now that you sit within the business, within an organisation, within a marketing function, you know, it's almost like you've experienced both worlds, right? Because I suppose when it comes to marketing roles, we always talk about you agency side or kind of like in-house, you know?
Yes.
So, and you're the first person I've interviewed who's done both, actually.
Okay.
So what would be great to hear from you is what do you think the main differences are between working agency side versus in-house?
It's really interesting because I think my perspective on in-house marketing has changed drastically since obviously working in-house, because I think where your agency, and this obviously is very dependent on the kind of agency you work for, the kind of people you work for, the size of agency, but my experience was in an agency that had the resources available. You had a web development team, you had a design studio, videographers, you had other members of marketing experts around you. So you had a lot of resource, and it was about, you know, it's about more than this, but a very big element to agency is the branding, the campaigns, that kind of bigger side with what I think most people think about as marketing. Whereas in-house, you don't have those resources available to you. And so you spend less time on what are the campaigns I create? What amazing videos can I create? It's about how do I get alignment across the team? How do I lay these foundations to actually be able to go out and do these campaigns? And how do I prove the value of marketing? Because when you're an agency, you're talking to other marketing experts, and quite often your clients are the marketing manager of that place or the marketing executive or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're in-house, you have to get buy-in from people who don't know what marketing is, don't particularly care about marketing, and it's sometimes looked at as a nice to have, whereas I'm a firm believer that marketing it's a business strategy, and I'm very bought into this watertight marketing approach by Bryony Thomas, and it's more than just the nice to have. So I suppose those are the main differences, because you're on your own a lot more internally than when you're in an agency.
And one message I sometimes preach, I suppose, to about in-house marketers. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but a lot of the time I actually think in many cases they're set up to fail a little bit. Now, what I mean by that is, I think sometimes like what you were saying about other people in the organisation may not necessarily care, may see it as nice to have, but it's almost like the expectations. Right, we've got our marketing person; they should be able to do everything marketing related.
Yes.
Right, and in my view, majority of full-time contracts these days, somewhere between 37, 40 hours a week. I see huge time constraints, not having the time to do stuff, but B, almost like, and there's also specialist skill gaps, not because they're not skilled, but because there's some things, as you know, that require kind of specialists on there. Absolutely. What are your thoughts on that?
I do agree. I think I'm very lucky that I was brought on because the people, my directors now, they saw the value of marketing, and that's why they wanted to develop a function. So I was really lucky that the senior leadership team saw that. My issue was trying to get buy-in from my peers and maybe the people who do the day-to-day who weren't at that strategic level. I feel like if you're in another company where you don't have that buy-in from the top necessarily, you are set up to fail because you are very reliant on budgets, which I know most companies absolutely are. But if you're in a company that you don't have the resource and you've got to compete with budget restraints and you need that technical support like a web developer or a designer, getting that approval to spend that money is really difficult because a lot of the time if you haven't got the function up to report efficiently or to show off that return on investment, that's where you kind of get stuck. So I do think a lot of the time people are set up to fail, but not through their own lack of skills. It is really just based on the resources available to them.
Yeah. And return on investment's an interesting one, isn't it? Because do you think, I think perfect world if we could, and don't get me wrong, there's some, I suppose, marketing activities which are easier to track end to end than others. Yeah. But do you feel sometimes there's a lot of pressure from above, more in general, not just to kind of you day to day, but to marketers in general, of being able to prove an ROI and all this kind of stuff basically all the time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's really difficult as well is some of the stuff that is really valuable, like brand awareness and reputation, that's not easy to prove it on a numerical point of view. And that's where it's quite difficult when you are working with people who they don't care about any of that. They just want to see how much money is it bringing in and how much money is it spending and whatnot. And I think when you work for certain companies, I work for a company who works very closely with schools, families, local authorities. It's really difficult when you don't necessarily have the systems in place that are matched up with today's level of marketing, if that makes sense. You kind of have to start from scratch and think, okay, well, how can I show the return on investment on this when the systems we use don't have the reporting function to meet the needs of a marketer? They meet the needs of the delivery, absolutely, but they don't, help me. So I have to try and figure out a way to do that. And that's where it could become quite difficult when you have to try and put a financial aspect on it, and you have to get quite creative, which I've personally enjoyed, but that's because I've had a few years to grow the marketing team internally, and now my focus has shifted. Right, I've put the foundations in, now I really want to try and make sure I'm showing this return on investment as best as I can. And I've got the confidence and the freedoms to do that, but if you don't, it's really difficult.
100%. And I think, one way I always try and describe it to business owners, and I don't know if you agree, but the whole time you're focused on activities where, don't get me wrong, it's nice because we can attribute revenue and opportunities fairly short to mid-term. Usually, in my view, those kind of activities, the cost to acquire a customer is usually a bit higher than actually maybe investing for a few years in just some brand recognition activities and brand awareness activities, and just, I suppose, just building our authority and credibility in our respective markets, so we can actually get some people coming to us as opposed to us having to fight for our dinner every time, right?
Exactly. It's you're totally right. And I think the cost of keeping a customer is so much less than finding new customers. And I think the more you can invest in that relationship building, referral management, the better, because you're using your time more efficiently and you're not doing this scattergun approach that may or may not work. And I think it goes back to this watertight marketing thinking where when your foundations are strong and you've got all the tools and resources in place, when people come through that customer journey, they naturally kind of progress themselves, and it's less reliant on you to nurture these contacts. And I just think that's one thing that I've tried really hard over the past few years. In my company, I know a lot of people elsewhere, is trying to understand that relationship between the marketing and the customer journey and other departments meeting their financial goals and how it works together. And it does work together. One big thing I've tried to do is tell the whole team that you, in our uniform, you're marketing, you're part of this brand. When every time you step out the house with your uniform on, you are representing this company. And it's kind of changing this mindset that marketing is just for the marketing team. It's for everyone.
Yeah. And I've got to ask Taylor, only if you feel comfortable sharing, so you got Taylor, agency Taylor, I'm gonna call her, and then you got in-house Taylor. So just take agency Taylor for a second. What's two or three things maybe you miss about agency, and two or three things you were chuffed to see the back of, and then I'll ask you the question again for in-house.
So I do look back at my agency years as, it's so weird because some of the best times, but also I still feel sometimes I've got PTSD from it, because I feel like I loved the teamwork, and we created some really amazing things, and I loved that, and I learned so much because it was so fast paced, and you had to kind of understand companies and different industries really, really quickly. And so I miss that kind of variation in who you're working with, and I learned so much. But in turn, I learned a lot because it was really fast, and I think that's one thing I don't miss. And I think I'm saying this as someone who, I haven't worked in agency since September 2020, so post-pandemic I imagine agencies look really different, and the flexibility is a lot different in terms of working from home. When I worked in agency, it was very much in the office 5 days a week. You work really hard in terms of the hours you have to put in and the expectations, and that was really great because it helps develop me. But I have a much better work-life balance working in-house, and I feel a lot less competitive, because that is an agency. One reason why it works is because, well, especially when I was working in agency, it did feel like there was a level of competition with each other, which is good and bad, I suppose. So hopefully that answers your question. But I miss the people.
And in-house, three things you love about it, but three things, or wouldn't mind a bit of that again from agency.
A few things I really love about working in-house is I've been able to grow so much. I came in as a marketing manager just on my own settings function, and I've built the team to 3, looking to hire our 4th later on this year. And that freedom to really make a team my own and to make the marketing function my own has been second to none. I feel really grateful for that opportunity, and because I've been the most kind of experienced marketer in the company, I've really enjoyed looking elsewhere for that kind of marketing support and guidance. So that's been really great, and I love what we do. I feel like the marketing I do now is much more the core marketing. It's really marketing at its most stripped back in terms of a business strategy, trying to find different ways to work with everyone. What I miss is also having marketing experts on hand. I miss having an in-house design team. One day I'm hoping to have another one. I miss those people that you can lean on for that experience, because it is just me. And whilst being the most experienced in marketing in the business has its benefits, because you kind of get free reign to choose kind of what direction you want to go in, it's obviously more pressure. And I feel, so I think I really miss agency, but I miss it because it's nostalgic now. It's thinking back about that time was really great. I wouldn't want to do it again.
Yeah, I think you present a really balanced view of the differences of working in both. It's quite nice to listen to, actually. And I suppose I want to jump forward a little bit, but then come back if you don't mind, because I think a natural place to just progress that bit there is about, I suppose people coming into this world, right? Whether it's kind of like people leaving university or leaving school and thinking about getting involved in marketing and pursue a career path. Now, would you recommend going down the agency route first? Would you recommend going to in-house first? Like, what kind of advice would you have for someone starting out in this world?
Yeah, I worked with a few marketing students a few years ago. They did some work for us as part of their project, and I said the same thing to them. I say now, if you're going to go into marketing and you are considering agency should be your first port of call. I think it's really hard to go from in-house into agency because the expectations are really different in terms of your turnaround of work, your attentiveness, and all of those stuff. And that's not to say that isn't important in-house. I just think it's really hard to change those behaviours. So I would really recommend anyone...
I agree with you on that, by the way, completely.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
I've seen many situations where it's not worked out, and I totally agree with that.
Yeah, because it's really difficult. And I think you could be amazing in-house, and then you go into agency and it doesn't work out, and then you have such a hit of confidence. But it's not because you're not good at your job. It's just two different worlds. And I think I was able to become a head of marketer at quite a young age and lead a successful team that's growing and is proving its worth because I had the agency experience. I would not have been able to do it without it. And I think having so much exposure to so many different people, industries, clients, ways of working, you can't get that anywhere but agency. So I would say agency first and foremost, especially to become a fully rounded marketer, learning about different tools, different skills, techniques, styles, because you bring that with you in-house.
What do you think agency does to a marketer from a approach to working? So I know we talk about style, skills, and people that you're around and stuff, but like, how did it form and develop you as an individual, do you think?
I'm someone who is naturally, I overthink everything, and I'm a planner. I like to plan things, but I feel a lot of that was developed and shaped by agency because I feel like working in agency really put an importance on deadlines for one, and internal communication because you're working as a team and quite often you're on different teams for different clients. The teams that communicated together and were aligned together and had proper steps and processes, they worked better and produced better results for their clients. And I think those skills I learned there as an individual is what I've tried to carry into my team now. So no, we're not an agency, but I'm trying to teach my team the importance of, if you're going to set up a meeting, having the agendas, having the notes, circulating them afterwards. Even if no one else in the company does that, we do that. If you put a deadline in, sticking to that deadline, because even if no one else sticks to that deadline, you stick to it. And I know these seem like basic things, but I think agency does a really good job at that.
It's not many do the basics well, Taylor.
Exactly.
So I'm completely with you, right? Because it's fascinating just listening to you, because it's like you develop I'll call it like an agency behavior. It's like a behavior thing, if you know what I mean. And you can always, I think, spot in conversation, even before you've spoken about someone's marketing experience in agency. I don't know about you, but I can always tell when they've worked in agency.
Yeah, definitely.
Just because you see their brain spinning, and need to make sure we put a date on that deadline. Need to make sure that the action points are agreed, and it's all the little organisational bits that sometimes, not in all cases, and I'm sure there's very organised people who have kind of started and have worked their way through, but sometimes you can just sense it a bit, I think.
Absolutely. I think because when you're in-house, your deadlines are your internal deadlines, and you can quite often shift them, change them. I mean, sometimes you have things that you have to stick to a certain date, but it's not as intense as agency, because there is that the client is paying you to do this. There's more repercussions, I suppose, from it. So yeah, I totally agree. You can spot someone who's worked at agency just by their care to detail, or I guess it's just like the general professionalism. And that's not to say people who work in-house don't have that. It's just different. I'm a stickler for meeting times as well. The notes, the key points, everything. And that's what I'm trying to pass on to my team, because where they go from here, I want to know that they've got those agency core values, I suppose.
Yeah. I had a little cringy saying the other day, and it's based on that whole, you can take the kid off the street, you can't take the street out the kid or something. You can take the marketer out the agency, but you can't take the agency out the marketer.
Yes,
Which
totally agree.
is so true. But moving on then to one thing I want to talk about is the topic of sustainability. Okay, because and I'll tell you why. Because what I find, and we work with various clients in various verticals and sizes and stuff like that. But even just speaking to peers, we're finding that on the sustainability front, not all businesses, but there's quite a few businesses where it's actually the marketer internally who's really driving the sustainability message.
Yeah.
Now, do you think that's because us as marketers are in charge of how our brand is perceived and how our brand looks in the marketplace? A, and B, do you think it's some marketers look at it thinking, oh crap, everyone else is talking about this sustainability thing, maybe we should be as well?
I think it's an element of both in a way. I think I like to think that as people, the more we become aware of things, the better we want to be as individuals and as companies. And I personally am really passionate about sustainability, meeting our net zero requirements, and any way that you as a company can do that, the better. We have launched a green strategy in its infancy. But I think for a lot of marketers who do it, it does come from that brand perspective. But I also think because marketers do also care a lot about the people that they're talking to, and they understand the people they're talking to, and it is a thing that we all talk about, and I think we recognize the importance of it. And I think so many companies are leading the way that you do run the risk of being left behind, and as marketers you have to consider that. But I think what I'm concerned about is marketers or companies in general who do it because it's something that we should be doing and not doing it to its full capacity. One thing we've discussed internally is we don't want to ever come across greenwashing or, doing something passive. At the moment, we've taken steps that we can, but there's still quite a passive approach to sustainability and the wider, green movement. And we could be doing more, and we are trying to do more. But I never agree with companies who just say, oh, we're doing this, but can't ever back it up, because I think that does more reputational damage long term. And you're not really helping everyone. I think people just value honesty. If you're a company who aren't doing anything actively and you're not actively promoting it, that's okay, but just own it, really. That's better for your reputation. Yeah,
totally agree. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think you're absolutely right. I think best practice, really, I suppose, and what you'd like to think is the right thing to do is actually businesses doing it from a place of genuine concern and want to actually make a difference, as opposed to we need to look like we're making a difference. But do you think marketing plays a huge part in that, in actually working out how this is broadcasted to audiences in terms of actually following our company? Or do you think that director level, right, here's the green strat, marketing, please do a few social media posts about it?
I think there is an element of that. I think it depends on the size of your company and who kind of drives it. I'm very fortunate that I sit on the senior leadership team, so our discussions about our green strategy, marketing, me and my team, we have an active role in it before it gets to that whole, here it is, go and promote it. But I think that when you are told that, I think sometimes it always comes down to the brief. If your director is giving you something that says, we're now doing this, go push it, and there isn't any detail as to, well, why are you doing it? What's the outcome? What's the long-term plan? It's, again, setting marketers up for failure, but setting your company's reputation up for failure, because I think it's quite easy nowadays. People are becoming a lot more savvy when it comes to sustainability promises by companies, and people are seeing the kind of, there is a word for it, but I can't remember, but seeing, it for its shallowness, I suppose, for lack of a better word. So I think people have just got to be careful, and it is down to the brief. You have to be able to, and I think marketers need to have the confidence, but I think directors need to give marketers that kind of ability to question those things as well. I think it can't just be assumed that you're going to promote it and everything's going to be fine.
Artificial intelligence, good for us or bad for us?
I think, I'm not going to sit here and say I know a lot about artificial intelligence. I feel like I need to see more of it to make a fully rounded opinion. But from what I do know, I personally am not a fan. And my team have tried things like ChatGPT in the past, and I know lots of tools are coming up with their own kind of AI pieces of work. And and I think you can always tell when they've shared a blog with me or shared a social post. I think, okay, the words are fine, like the sentiment is okay, but the tone of voice isn't really right and something's missing, and it is that human element. And I think copywriting is such a skill that I feel like I would be doing my team a disservice if I said, yeah, use ChatGPT and that's fine. Because, you know, being able to write and to embody a brand is so important. And that's coming from someone who, again, I can copyright fine, but I'm not a copywriter. People have, you know, are really skilled at that, and that is a job in itself. But I don't think I'm a fan of it at the moment as it stands. I value the written word.
Yeah, and do you know what? I share that opinion because, like, it does take the human element out of it massively. I don't think it understands emotional context and tonality well. Even when you try to prompt it for tonality, I think it comes out with something either too extreme to the wrong direction. But I suppose where I'm kind of leading into that is what I'm finding is, I suppose if you, like, back to what we're talking about with people kind of entering the marketing world, you kind of looking at it as a career. I'm seeing a lot of entry-level marketers, understandably, kind of using it for copywriting, for social media posts, to be more efficient with tasks, etc. But I think what worries me is, like, you know, when I got into marketing, and Taylor, I'm sure when you got into marketing, we didn't have a ChatGPT, right? you kind of learnt stuff yourself. And I feel so old saying that, by the way. I feel like I'm turning into that guy that's like, back in our day, we didn't have ChatGPT, AI kind of thing. But we didn't, right? So, but then that's how you learn. Now, do you think there's a risk that people entering the marketing world are at risk of not actually developing skills and learning and understanding the kind of core principles of marketing because we have a tool that can just kind of do it for us?
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, and I think it depends on the team you have, the company you work in, the industry you work in, because I'm sure that for lots of people, especially in agency, if you've got loads of clients, you've got to do, I don't know, 3 to 5 social content planners, it can be a good way to get you off a blank page. I'm sure that's fine if you then can go back and retrospectively tweak it. But I do think it's doing a disservice because even though, okay, it did give me some level of increased anxiety trying to draft all this stuff for multiple clients in a short time frame, it made me much more efficient and it made me a better writer. It made me more accepting of feedback and criticism because no one likes to see a blog post they've written completely reworked. But it is also how you learn in terms of, okay, well, what mistakes did I make? What could I do better next time? And so I think for marketers coming into the industry to not have to worry about the time constraints as much or not worried about embedding themselves in a tone of voice as soon as possible, I just think long term doesn't make them as rounded as they could be. And it's not through their own fault. So
yeah. And I suppose what ties into quite nicely is I know we've spoken about if someone wants to kind of join marketing, the benefits of going into maybe agency first and first kind of in-house, etc. But is there any other pieces of advice that you would offer someone who's starting out marketing today?
I guess my biggest piece is whether you're agency or in-house is to consume content that's not just for your company or your industry or your peers. I think the best way that you grow creatively and in terms of confidence in your conviction is to learn from other people. I tell my team to allocate, even if it's just 10 minutes on a Monday morning and 10 minutes on a Friday afternoon, of just scrolling social media, scrolling different websites. And that can be brands that you love or brands that you know of or want to know more about. It doesn't just have to be our competitors or our industry, because the more you consume, and that's not saying be on your phones and computers for like 10 hours a day, but the more kind of different things that you see, the more you can actually understand what good marketing is, because it's not the obvious. It's you don't remember this piece of sales promo that you saw in an email. You remember the adverts or the slogans that were different, that made you feel something. So that would be my advice. Look everywhere, take everything in, learn from everything. You're never going to be the expert. You're never going to be the smartest person in the room. So learn.
And it's an interesting question. Do you think that, because I was actually talking to a CMO the other day, and he was saying how, I think it was like 5-10 years ago, the average amount of jobs someone would have in their lifetime was like 2.5.
Wow.
And then a few years later it became like 3, and now I think we're at a record high. It was something like 8 to 10 jobs in our lifetime now. Do you think there's benefits in the marketing world of actually every so often just rolling the dice for new experiences, or do you still kind of believe in those core values of, if you're in a good organisation with a good purpose and a good mission, stay put?
I think it's different. I think,
tough question, by the way, tough question.
I definitely believe that you have to change in order to change, and things have to be uncomfortable for you to progress. That doesn't necessarily mean, for me, moving around every couple of years. I do think there's a benefit to it, especially for marketers, because you learn different companies, different strategies, different audiences. But I think if you're in a company that is open to supporting your development, you know, it's fine to stay forever if you want, but just make sure that you're always learning. And I think one thing that my company supports is this idea of going to, even as a head of marketer, going to shadow and do work experience at another organization to watch how their marketing department does, because it helps you develop and know what's out there. When you are writing the same stuff every day or talking to the same people, you can fall stagnant. And I've worked with people in other organizations, namely local authority, who have been there for over 20 years. That's not to say they're not good at their job, but the world has changed so much in the last year, 5 years. So 20 years, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. And I think to be the best you can be, you have to continue learning. So I know that doesn't answer your question to a straight yes or no, but I think it depends.
It does depend. It does depend. And I suppose just a few last kind of quick fire questions for you then, Taylor. So, number one, if you could step in a time machine, rewind way back to Taylor in that restaurant when she was thinking about marketing, what would you say to her?
I would say, you'll be fine. I think I would just say that marketing is a good job for you as a person with your everything. And I feel like where I'm at now is worth everything else, because I found a good company, a good balance, a good mindset. So just keep learning.
And number two, if you, I suppose, had to change one thing, what would it be?
That's a tough question.
The reason why I say had is because I say if you could, too many people say I wouldn't. So that's what I'm saying, if you had to.
If I had to, I think it's really tricky, because everything that has happened has led me to this role now, and has led me to the person I want to be, and the leader I want to be. I think hindsight's an amazing thing. I think my impression of my time at the agency is naturally very different to when I was in it. I think especially sitting on a leadership team now, I get things a bit more. So I would probably go back, if I had to, I would try to say to myself during the agency time, don't stress so much. You'll be fine. You're learning a lot. Don't worry about the decisions that are made that are out of your control. Just soak as much up as possible. So, but I feel like I did that. So it's really difficult because, I'm sorry, I can't answer that.
That's all right. And I suppose really the final one is another had to question. But if marketing wasn't the route you went down in the end, even though it's the perfect role for you, kind of who you are as a person, skill set, etc., like what other world could you visualize yourself in, or do you think you would have ended up in?
So there's two routes, and I say this because I daydream about it daily. I'm happy where I am, so when my directors listen to this, I'm not going anywhere. But I can see myself down either the conservation route or the more sustainability for businesses kind of route, because I do feel really passionate about that. I kind of sometimes think I'm too passionate to actually go down the political route, because I just wouldn't be able to sleep at night, because I would be too stressed about everything. So I feel like they're kind of good middle grounds of I'm actually doing something that's good for the world, but without the political element all the time. So those are the routes that I would see myself going down.
Any passing final thoughts for anyone listening to this getting into marketing?
First of all, thanks for listening. But also, I think just trust yourself. I think the biggest thing, and this is not just for marketing, but it's everyone in their career. The people who maybe don't do as well progressing are the people who don't hold themselves to account and don't have confidence in their decisions. You're not always going to get it right. You're going to make mistakes, but that's not a weakness. Like you're going to learn from it. So I would just say, put your hands up if you get it wrong, hold yourself to account, and have the confidence that you're going to be fine.
Guys, there you have it. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Inside Marketing. Wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and everywhere else, subscribe, like, please share. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect to Taylor as well. And if you've got any questions for her, and guys, we'll catch you on the next one. Taylor, thank you so much for your time. It's been great having you on.
No, thank you for having me.